And he that went before now came last. And that which was white and black and all direction was thrown against itself. Grown mightily indignant at the words of the gods, Malal did turn his heart against them, and flee into the chambers of space. And no man looked to Malal then, save those that serve that which they hate, who smile upon their misfortune, and who bear no love save for the damned. At such times as a warrior's heart turns to Malal, all gods of chaos grow fearful, and the laughter of the outcast god fills the tomb of space. Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan, and today we're going to start a new series on the channel focusing around all the different curiosities of the Warhammer franchise. And as you can imagine from the intro that we had, today's topic will be centered around Malal, the renegade Chaos God. It may come as a surprise, but Chaos is not rooted to the Big Four: Khorne, the Blood God; Nurgle, the Lord of Plague; Slaanesh, the Prince of Excess; and Tzeentch, the Changer of Ways. In fact, there are many different deities that vie for control within the Chaos realms and through other parts of time and space. Enter Malal, also known as the Hierarch of Terror and Anarchy. This Chaos God is solely dedicated to the utter destruction of his dark brothers, which might sound very confusing to most. The Chaos Gods are locked in an eternal war known as the Great Game, where they fight for supremacy over the realms of chaos. But even then, the utter destruction of another god would not prove beneficial, as there must be a certain balance, with the scales tipping ever so slightly into different directions. This then allows them, when the time comes, to join forces and lead unholy crusades over whichever target they might find suitable. So why would Malal want the destruction of chaos itself? The renegade god, like any other chaos god, does represent something, and Malal represents destruction in its purest form. It is destruction against chaos, order, neutrality. Everything must be destroyed, for his true representation of chaos is the void of nothingness that comes after the destruction of all things. His greatest adversary, however, are the other chaos gods, where Malal actively works against them to see their schemes destroyed and eventually see his adversaries completely erased from time and real space. For this, the champions of Malal, commonly known as the Doomed Ones, sometimes do work alongside many mortals, often allying up if the need represents itself to make sure that the forces of chaos are repelled or destroyed. While that might sound quite confusing, it's only for the destruction of chaos itself, and once the forces of chaos have been repelled or destroyed, the forces of Malal, the Doomed Ones, will happily then turn their attentions and their blades to those who they fought alongside. It is rather unfortunate that we know next to nothing about Malal at this point of time, mainly because he has been rather unknown. A renegade chaos god is of course not a strong deity, expelled from the realms of chaos, or residing in some small pocket dimensions which would not allow for that much power. But do not be fooled, for Malal himself is not weak, and he has a number of followers, both mortal and demon, which follow his every command in his unholy crusade to see the end of all things. Let's begin with the mortals. We know of the Doomed Ones, warriors of chaos dedicated to Malal in the destruction of all things chaos. These are a warband, but there has been theories that there might be many warbands. We never know exactly, considering the sheer scope and scale of the chaos waste. These warriors clad themselves in black and white armor and often fight in pure silence. It is very much hypothesized by many historians that these warriors themselves are the true representation of chaos, like their deity. This also extends to that of the 41st millennium, where a chaos warband known as the Sons of Malice, formerly known as the Sons of Malal, wear very similar colorings and fight in a very similar way. Now, we obviously do not know too much about both, yet we do know that sometimes it has been rumored that very interesting demonic-like weaponry also appears to be wielded by their commanders. Weapons like that of the Dreadaxe, which seems to cause extra harm to that of demonic entities of any of the other Chaos Gods. There are at least 2 known ways on how to join the ranks of the Doomed Ones. There might be more, but his history is rather left in the shadows at this point. The first would be in the most traditional sense. You are seeking revenge because a Chaos Warband has come and destroyed your town, and now the god Malal reaches out to you, offering you power and offering you the tools that you need to be able to destroy that which you hate so much. The second has always been wildly speculated, but it is thought that there are times where warriors of chaos dedicated to Khorne, Tzeentch, Nurgle, or even Slaanesh find themselves resentful of their patron deity, beginning to regret their decisions and also loathing that which has blessed them so much. Malal, of course, has many spies and is able to take advantage of this situation, sowing the seeds of discontent and tempting this once proud champion. How these champions are able to go unnoticed is unknown, but we do know of very rare circumstances of a champion of, say, Nurgle falling to Slaanesh, so this is not completely out of the question. And clearly such an event would be a major victory to Malal, having been able to tempt a follower of another dark god to his own devices. Of all the champions of Malal, one stands above the rest. This is Caleb Dark, once very content with his relatively normal life, but unfortunately forced into servitude after an atrocity. You see, a Chaos Warband had come into his city and murdered everyone, leaving him the only survivor, but he had been twisted mentally as he had seen his own parents being murdered, and watched helplessly as everything that he held dear was being destroyed in front of his own very eyes. Here, the dark god Malal took advantage of the situation, appearing before Caleb and offering him power, offering to be his protector, and allow him to take revenge on those who killed his loved ones, so long as he agreed to serve. Caleb unfortunately could not refuse, and he was blessed with the mighty Dreadaxe that we spoke of before, a weapon which even the other Chaos Gods fear themselves. We will of course speak about Caleb in a future video in a much more detailed sense, as now we need to look towards the unliving servants. We know of 4 demonic entities, that of which was very early into the life cycle of the Warhammer franchise, and we've never really seen too much of them afterwards. The first is known as the Greater Demon of Malal. It looks like a hulking but also quite slender creature, but given its title we can imagine that it would be compared to that of a Great Unclean One, a Bloodthirster, a Lord of Change, or even a Keeper of Secrets. It's also known to carry quite a large blade, which could be imagined to also have very similar properties to that of the Dreadaxe. The next would be the Lesser Demon of Malal, which we can see here, and we can imagine that this would be the basic frontline troop, very similar as to how a Bloodletter or a Demonette would be to that of a Bloodthirster or a Keeper of Secrets. But what we can see is that it does share some similarities with the Greater Demon that we saw before, and interestingly enough, it has 2 blade-like arms. We would expect that it would be fast-moving and also very good at dealing with enemy hordes. Next would be the Steed of Malal. Interestingly enough, this is a very insectoid creature, but everything we've seen has had a lot of insectoid similarities, and well, we can imagine that this would be an incredibly fast creature hopping around the battlefield and possibly being quite well armored due to the carapace. And lastly, we have the Beast of Malal, again sharing a lot of insectoid similarities as we've seen through all the demons, and we can imagine that this would be fast moving once again, but able to do quite a lot of damage. Think of it as a very quick moving type of Beast of Nurgle in a sense. Strangely enough, you can compare all the insectoid stuff to that of a praying mantis, so it is likely to believe that the demons of Malal would have focused very heavily on quick running tactics. Now, there is a former mortal follower who has long since been retconned and changed his origins, but Skrarg the Sorcerer, originally when he was introduced into the Warhammer Fantasy canon, was a follower of Malal. But, as we all know, a bit of a copyright issue struck Games Workshop and Malal had to be written out of canon. However, he wasn't. The original authors and Games Workshop, unfortunately, yes, did have to argue, and that made Malal get removed, which is a shame. This happened in the 80s, yet even then there have been mentions of him in the 90s, and then we started seeing more mentions under a new name, where Malal, or at least what we know of Malal, has been mentioned every now and then as the renegade chaos god Malice, following the same cycle and following more or less the same lore that we know. This has mostly been coming into effect with that of Warhammer 30,000 and Warhammer 40,000, where the Sons of Malal have been renamed to that of the Sons of Malice, and have received some nods in the lore every now and then, with the most recent being in the 13th Black Crusade, where the Sons of Malice tried to reclaim their homeworld. And with that, in Warhammer 30k, there was a faction known as the Mirror of Hatred, which does heavily insinuate that the Mirror of Hatred faction is that of Malal, known as Malice in this day and age. Unfortunately, in recent times, we have not seen much for Warhammer Fantasy. This is because of the end of the series itself, but before the end of the series, Malal was unfortunately replaced with Nakoho and Zuvasin, two other renegade gods to replace the power of one. So far in Age of Sigmar, to the best of my knowledge, there's been no representation of Malal, but Nakoho and Zuvasin have had some mentions here and there. But before we end this video, we do have to ask ourselves a simple question. Is there a chance of Malal returning? Which, unfortunately, as Malal, it would not happen unless something drastically happened in the background with Games Workshop and the former writers. I do not believe that we'll see Malal ever again. It is possible that he could get a complete redesign, however, with the idea of Malice returning, but just as something completely different. But the demons, the concept art, that belongs to that of Tony Uckland, I believe. So unfortunately, we won't see the return of Caleb or these interesting demons ever being released through Games Workshop means, though it is to my understanding that the demons have been released through another party, but that doesn't really fall into the canon that we all know at this point. Who knows what the future holds though, as we've seen a lot of fastballs by Games Workshop in the most recent years, but let me know what you guys think about Malal in the comments below, and let's discuss the Renegade Chaos God.